In a world asking the question, what if the movies that got delayed came out on time and they were different? That's the case in my universe. I'm Steven Shinder and you're listening to Delayed Replay, Season 5, airing every other Saturday, unless I change my mind. Hey everyone, before getting into the John Wick Chapter 5 Rest for the Wick discussion, I just wanted to say, in the spirit of the spooky season, that my friend Nate's new book is out. It's titled Tragedy of Mistletoe, a Bronze Age slasher. And this is a story that you might find to be a thrilling read. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can get it in paperback, hardcover, and ebook formats. You can check those listings. I'll include the links in the show notes. So yeah, check that out. And happy Halloween later this month, and enjoy the show. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe, but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, Steven Shinder, and joining me once again, I think for the first time in like a little over a year, it's Kiyan. How's it going, Kiyan?
Hey, good. Thanks for asking, Steven. How are you?
Yeah.
On this fine Saturday afternoon.
Doing all right. Earlier I got kind of sleepy, so I took like a nap in the middle of the day. I mean, you know how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes you take naps, sometimes you don't.
Right. Right, so we're talking about John Wick Chapter 5, which in this podcast universe is titled Rest for the Wick. So I think that's a play on words for the phrase no rest for the wicked,
Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't actually realize that. No, I'm just kidding. I did. Come on.
Right. And it's been like, I think 3 years since Yumi and Dylan, who couldn't make it to this one, talked about Chapter 4. And so you've seen the first 3 since then, right? I remember you went into 4 without having seen the first 3 then.
Yeah, that's right. So when we recorded 3 years ago, I hadn't seen any of the John Wick movies. So 4 was my first experience with the franchise. Since then, I have since gone back and watched 1, 2, and 3.
Right. And what'd you think of the first 3?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of knew you were going to ask that. Like, it's interesting. We may not want to dive too deep into this because I could talk about it for quite a bit, but like I kind of see 1 as kind of its own thing, and then 2 and 3 are sort of lumped together in my mind. Is that how you kind of see it as well?
Yeah, and I pretty much mentioned the same thing. Like 1 works pretty well as a standalone, and everything after is like trying to build up the world continuously. It's kind of like how the original Saw could stand on its own, and then like everything from, well, at least from 2 through 7, like pretty much continue like threads from right after each other type of thing.
Yeah, and I think if I'm not mistaken, Chapter 2 and 3 were produced like either together or like they knew while they were making 2 that there was going to be a 3. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that does sound familiar. And in our universe, 4 and 5 were like back to back, but it's taken this podcast a long time to get around to talking about 5. I figure, hey, the 10th anniversary of the first movie's coming up, so might as well talk about it now. And I think another reason it took me so long to getting around to talk about 5 is when I originally tried watching it, it took the shaky cam element to like a whole nother level from the start, and it just was so vomit inducing. Like I vomited into my like popcorn
bucket. Well, thankfully I'd already eaten the popcorn like during the trailers and stuff. But
Right,
yeah, that was
yeah.
the whole thing.
Who doesn't? I mean, right. But you're right. There were so many portions of this movie that were just colors blurring on a screen, almost, sort of one of those painters. I don't know what they're called, but the sort of paint palettes, right? Where that have a thumb hole, sort of you hold them while you're painting. Portions of this movie, frames, shots, and scenes of this movie, sort of just reminded me of smearing paint together on one of those. Taking the previous John Wick movies kind of went in that direction with their sort of neon look about them. Sorry, I'm not using super technical language here, but this one just took it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, and we've talked before about how like neon purple sort of became like the default color for the movies, but here they kind of go through like at certain points it has like that matrix shade of green for whatever reason,
Mm-hmm. And another thing is these sort of visual decisions that they made also really clashed with the classic John Wick subtitles in the scene. You know what I mean? Made those really hard to read.
Yeah, like the text was like, even if you're like wearing glasses, like the text is like hard to read and like hurts the eyes. It's really annoying. Chapter 4 had John Wick in Hawaii and he takes out all these assassins, but there's of course more business to take care of. And so he's like, the Continental, huh? I guess I have to go to another non-continental United States location.
Right.
And so he ends up having to travel to Alaska, which for a bit like takes up some of this film. What'd you think of this location and some of the shots we got here?
The icy frozen wastes were sure a change of pace from previous John Wick outings. The series has previously explored mostly cityscapes, and then obviously for being in Hawaii, sort of a tropical location, and 3 similarly also had a section set in the Sahara Desert. So John Wick has traveled mostly, when he's not in cities, he's traveled mostly to sort of hot or tropical or desert locations. So it's a change of pace for the series, putting him somewhere cold.
Yeah, definitely. Like we have him, like there was that fight scene that all took place within a small igloo, and it's like, how'd they fit all of this? Like, how are they able to do this?
Right, and despite some of the visual perplexities of this movie, it did continue the classic John Wick tradition of having very like cleverly choreographed fights in enclosed locations.
Yeah, like there were moments where, he would hit something and it would make the snow fly into like the camera lens, so then it gets stuck on the camera lens, and then you'd have this existential question of like, wait a minute, are the snow bits like floating in the air in universe, or are we just supposed to ignore that?
I gotta say, I did not know there were that many ways to kill somebody with like a brick of snow, a snowball, icicles even. You think just stabbing them would be the default method, but no, apparently.
Yeah, like the icicles, and there's even a moment where he gets a carrot from a snowman and uses that as a weapon. Yeah, it's like, eat your vegetables.
I know. And you're choking people out with scarves and all this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like how he also not only takes out assassins, but also people who are just not taking good care of their snow dogs, and so he pretty much like liberates the snow dogs by like, getting rid of these unworthy dog owners, so it's just another reminder that people who are bad to dogs probably shouldn't live, you know?
Or at least not announce their presence to John Wick, you might say. But now, was it just
Right.
me, or were those scenes, was that implied to be like an interruption of the Iditarod? Is that what that was?
Remind me again what the Iditarod is?
So the Iditarod is a long dog sled race. Takes place, I believe, yearly in Alaska, and it's over multiple days. So it's a very strenuous thing for the
Oh,
dogs
okay.
and the mushers. Yeah, and so were those scenes where you see John Wick, like you said, liberate these dogs? Was that like, were those Iditarod racers? Am I just making like, is that what you got out of it too?
Maybe it was because it looked organized and there were the like signposts and boundary things, so it very well could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was also a huge surprise how the main villain he's fighting in this movie is played by Ryan Gosling himself, known for other roles in movies that have starred Ryan Gosling.
known for other roles in movies that he's been in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Crazy Stupid Love, Blade Runner 2049. I mean, people know who Ryan Gosling is, I think.
Yeah, they do. A fresh face.
Yeah, his face does look fresh, yeah.
Oh, I was saying he isn't a fresh face, I guess, literally and metaphorically. I don't know.
Oh, well, I mean, he's a familiar face, but he looks like he keeps his own face fresh, I guess is what we're getting at.
Yeah. The John Wick franchise is no stranger to just like piling ultra famous actors into its movies. You know what I mean? Like,
right, like there's Lawrence Fishburne's character and some other characters I've forgotten, so yeah.
Yeah, some of those less memorable characters.
Yeah, I mean Vin Diesel as well, when he rose from the sand in the previous one, like that was the whole thing.
Yeah, speaking of Lawrence Fishburne's character though, what did you think of his inclusion in this one, and specifically the directorial or writing choice to have him wield nunchucks in a number of scenes?
I thought that was interesting. Like, I don't recall if we saw him with nunchucks before, so it was like, oh, here's another skill I bet you didn't know he had. And there are like these behind the scenes featurettes where he talks about he says something akin to like, oh, so I went ahead and decided to try learning to use nunchucks, but then I sucked at it, so they got my stunt double to do those parts.
Yeah, it goes without saying that all the John Wick movies, this one included, are super heavy on the stunt double work. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the director and co-creator of this series, Chad, whatever his last name is, Stahelski, something like this. He was a stunt actor, or like he started his career, I guess, as a stunt actor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think we ever figured out like how to pronounce his last name.
Yeah, did we not?
Like 3 years ago, and then I just never like looked it up since then.
Nice.
I'll just put it in the show notes if I care to remember. But yeah, I thought those nunchuck scenes, even though you can tell that's a stunt double, I thought they were pretty eventful, but it still has that like shaky cam problem, and so yeah, that got really annoying. And what'd you think of how they incorporated the Aurora Borealis, that whole thing?
Yeah, I never knew you could. I never knew there were so many ways to just murder people with natural phenomena like that. But John Wick managed to pull it off.
Yeah, he like summons the light and gets it to like cut people up. Like this really delves into like some sci-fi supernatural stuff. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, John Wick has always. Yeah, I think you mentioned this when we last recorded, when we talked about Chapter 4. But John Wick has always sort of had a slightly larger than life vibe to it. It's not directly explicitly supernatural, but it's like almost there. I think that touches back on what we were talking about before with one, like John Wick 1 feeling kind of disconnected from the rest of them, because that one feels the most grounded and realistic. But the rest of them are certainly heightened, and this one certainly took that to a whole different level. Hearing people are not necessarily pleased with that direction, but I didn't really care.
Yeah, I think by this point, it feels like it's getting to the end of his story. So I was kind of checked out and resigned to just being like, okay, this is how it's going to happen, whatever type thing.
Yeah, I'm for throwing a wrench in things right at the last minute. Why not?
Yeah, like for the final chapter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like they really do take advantage of like the cold aesthetic. Like later in the movie, he ends up in Svalbard. This is like an island like in northern Russia or something, right?
Yeah, so the movie doesn't do a particularly good job of explaining where this is. But as far as I understand, it's like it's sort of an island in the Arctic Ocean. So not particularly different from Alaska. But yeah, they head over here, and you sort of you lose a bit. What I liked about the Alaska portions of this movie was the aesthetic quality of like the bright red blood on the white snow backdrop. Since it's not snowing as heavily in the Svalbard sections, you kind of lose that a bit. I don't know. Is that something you lamented similarly to me?
No, yeah, there's something. This is gonna sound weird, but there's something aesthetically pleasing about, in movies, seeing like the red blood on white snow, like in Cult of Chucky, for example. So going somewhere where there's less of that, it does kind of feel like a bit of a turn. And there's a portion where John Wick is having like this philosophical discussion about mortality, and he's suddenly thinking about century eggs. And what was that all about?
Well, I think first of all, it's important to mention the hilarious aspect that he's doing all of this. He's monologuing while he's killing people.
Yeah.
So the John Wick series does have its moments of humor, right? It has its sort of, it knows what it's doing. And I think they knew what they were doing here too. So just the sheer hilarity struck me of John Wick having this existential crisis just while he's murking people left and right. Yeah, but it really is. It when we last talked about this series, I remember we didn't necessarily rail into it, but we were kind of skeptical of the end of John Wick 4, how it devolved, you might say, into a philosophical discussion, people just sitting around talking, resolving their differences through words instead of violence. But this scene really marries that direction that they were clearly trying to go with 4 with what these movies are known for, which is the over-the-top violence. So it was an interesting choice from that perspective.
Yeah, and in terms of the humor, it feels like they were also going for some humor by having him reminisce about his life and, times when he like jumped from one building to the next. And like the way that they show this is in the form of like anime style. But also it feels like a comic book where jumping from one building to another, it feels like jumping from the panel of one comic book page to another panel of the next comic book page. It's really weird, the artistic direction that they take with these flashbacks.
Yes, sort of from the middle of the movie onward, the artistic decisions start to stand out, I would say. Going into this anime / comic book style was reminiscent to me, at least, of the Animatrix, you know, another series, or the series, I guess, that first put Keanu on the map in terms of him being in action movies. And now we have John Wick kind of doing the same thing. Of course, Keanu himself was not in the Animatrix because those were just sort of side stories and shorts. But sort of a similar thing going on here, interestingly enough.
Yeah, an Animatrix, not to be confused with Animaniacs, you know.
No, why do people make that confusion, or are people confused in that way?
No, probably not. Probably not. I just feel like they sound kind of similar. So
yeah, they do.
I'm just giving that disclaimer type thing. I don't know.
Interesting, though, like, now that I think about it, how Keanu has basically headlined the probably the most important action movies of the past 25 years. Those being The Matrix and then this series.
Yeah, and also Bill and Ted, you know, you can't forget that, you know.
Well, that's the thing, is like, I think before The Matrix, I'm pretty sure Keanu was mostly sort of in like weird comedies and like romantic movies and stuff like this. I may be wrong about that. I'm obviously not the most knowledgeable guy out there. But yeah, he's now known as like an action guy, so good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, that is good for him. You know, in fact, it makes me happy for him, you know.
Is that like a reference to something? Because if it was, I didn't get it.
No, it's not a reference. I was just saying. But
yeah,
anyway,
it's good for him financially, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, like these fight sequences, they really do get pretty violent. Like there's a moment where he rips someone's rib out and then feeds it to, like, he uses it as a weapon against one of his other opponents and then shoves it into the guy's throat. And it's like, damn, they're really going all out with this.
Mm-hmm. I did like in this movie how it sort of centered on one villain. There were multiple scenes, which I feel is kind of contradictory to the previous John Wick movies. There were multiple scenes with Keanu versus Gosling, you know, front and center, just them two. Which, if you look back at the previous John Wick movies, that's not necessarily how it was done, I guess. You might even consider John Wick himself to be the villain of the first movie, considering he's hunting a man down as his main prerogative.
Yeah, but it's a guy who like killed a dog, so it's fine, you know.
Yeah, right, exactly. And like wrecked his car or something, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that does sound vaguely familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting how Ryan Gosling's character is just referred to as the champagne champion. And it's like, what does that even mean? Did I miss the explanation of that, you know?
No, I don't think you did. And this was a bit of a twist, right? Because aside from John Wick 1, the John Wick movies have always tried to build up this sort of deep lore, I guess you could say, or, you know, the sort of assassin world. They've always done so in a rather clear-cut way, I would say. There's never really moments of like, you know, look into the camera and explain what's happening, but it's pretty easy to follow. It's pretty easy to understand. This champagne master sort of thing that they dive into was confusing, perhaps intentionally so.
Yeah, it especially gets confusing when, you know, the thing that Ryan Gosling does to best John Wick is he gets this syringe and injects John Wick with something that's like now killing him. And so this was like not how I expected. That, you know, we knew that going in that, okay, John Wick is probably gonna die in this one, but I did not expect that it would be something like this, where, you know, he gets injected with something, and then, you know, he has like these weird hallucinations, and you start to wonder, like, with the sequences that come after this, it's like, oh, is he fighting stuff in the afterlife now? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and it seemed, you know, maybe this was just my interpretation, but it seemed that whatever he was injected with, be it a drug or, you know, whatever else it might have been, it seemed to be affected, or seemed to be activated rather, by the aurora. You know, both like John Wick made use of the aurora borealis as a weapon in Alaska, and continued to do so in Svalbard to his own demise, apparently. And it just, you know, it like, this is only registering with me now, and it's kind of making me see the movie in a better light in hindsight. But perhaps the sort of paint smeary, neon wash, like paint neon glow all over the screen type thing was sort of a visual allusion to the dangers of the aurora, right?
Okay.
It seemed to me that the drug that Wick was injected with was activated or somehow triggered by the Northern Lights.
Yeah, like looking back, that does kind of make sense. Like, it's, you know, like he has this thing in his blood and gets triggered by that light. So kind of like the way moonlight affects lycanthropes and other things. So yeah, it's like now he's going through like these trippy visuals that are like different colors and lights and stuff, and he's fighting off like literal demons, basically, like with horns and wings and stuff.
Right. Yeah, I was on board. You know, like I said before, why not just throw a wrench into things at the end? The seeming end, we're seemingly moving closer and closer to John Wick's end, as the end of this movie indicates.
Yeah, and like during these sequences, he even has a wrench in his hand somehow. So it's like, you know, he's basically doing this Ratchet and Clank type thing, fighting off these demons. And it's like, that's an odd choice there, but okay.
But it was all part of the sort of pun-based things that start occurring, right? Because he had the wrench in one hand, and then the other shoulder, he had that sort of monkey companion climbing all over himself, assisting with his assassinations.
Oh yeah, so it seemed kind of Jack and Daxter in a way too. Yeah.
Yeah, another throwback video game reference, I guess.
Yeah, this is why PlayStation is the best system. You know. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I have no opinion.
Okay. All right.
None at all.
But yeah, I think the wrench is also supposed to symbolize, you know, because people use wrenches to fix cars, right? And we've seen lots of cars in this film series. So it kind of feels like they were trying to have something industrial like that to remind us of where this series started out, while we're in this sort of unfamiliar, somewhat supernatural territory now in this portion.
Yeah, you're right, I think, and it's almost symbolic, right? Because whatever his name was in the first movie, who killed John Wick's dog and wrecked his car, you know, he you know, the son of whatever, you know, the Russian mob boss, whatever this guy was, he inflicted grievous, you know, wounds on John Wick's dog, on John Wick himself. John Wick also is a killer. Obviously, he's not a nice man. But symbolically here, having him have the wrench, I feel is noteworthy, right? Because his brand of killing is I don't know, somehow trying to put a stop to things, fixing things, right? He doesn't wreck cars, he fixes them, hence the wrench. And he's still just trying to get out, you know. Of course, now he's in sort of, I guess, pseudo hell. So what's going to happen? But like, still just trying to get out.
Yeah, and we do eventually cut back to Ryan Gosling. He's like trying to bury John Wick's body in this field of wheat. And I get the sense that the wheat means something to Ryan Gosling's character. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, like if this was part of his past, or like it felt like this location was familiar to him in a sense.
Yeah, it definitely had something to do with his code name. There was, he's the champagne master. He's in a field of wheat. This is never really fully explained. It's not even halfway explained even, but like there has to be some connection. There has to be some like something going on with beer here, right? Do you know what I mean, right? Because like I don't know. I almost don't even want to speculate. It was the ending was too psychedelic and trippy to even like I don't know parse really.
Yeah, it was super weird because Ryan Gosling, as he's doing all this, or I guess after he does this, he takes a drink, like some alcoholic beverage, and then he consults like this doctor that's nearby, and the doctor says you have too much iron in your blood, and then we kind of zoom into his blood, and it very like psychedelic visuals, and it's like, oh, I guess this is killing him on the inside. So John Wick might die, but this guy might also die.
Yeah, it was interesting how there were actual fight scenes going on seemingly inside his blood cells, mirroring what John Wick was going through. They even went for that split screen effect at one point.
Yeah, it also reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Osmosis Jones, where like
yeah, of course I have. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but it didn't look exactly like the animation there, but it was more psychedelic, more 3D, I guess you could say. And yeah, I did kind of like that they did that split screen effect, because what is one's blood but hell itself? There's an unknown like burning realm within us that we cannot see, and sometimes it feels like it's going too fast. And yeah, I don't know, just in the moment, when I got to this, it really resonated with me somehow.
Yeah, like it courses through us all type thing. Yeah. And another good use of the live action / animation thing that sort of the end of this movie tried to capitalize on.
Right, yeah. So there were definitely some artistic choices here. And I know that there were like some people who had watched the movie and were like, well, that was really stupid. But I'm like, I don't know. I just like, some of this really stuck with me and made me think,
Yeah, I'm always open to the more ambiguous endings. The ones that use sort of visual storytelling over, I don't know, just beating you over the head with what is sort of what happens through dialogue and stuff like this. No pun intended with my use of the phrase beating you over the head, considering what we're watching, by the way.
Right. Yeah, I think maybe having watched some David Lynch movies, which are surrealist movies, and I know that David Lynch isn't the only surrealism filmmaker out there, but I think those kind of prepared me for movies where there aren't many explanations, and it's mainly about the emotion of what you're seeing on the screen, you know? I thought it was really fascinating how we get this sense that, okay, maybe John Wick stays dead, but he'll prevail and come out of this like hellish dimension or whatever he's in and go to some other better afterlife type thing. And meanwhile, Ryan Gosling is just dying, and it's kind of an unknown, like where he'll end up type thing.
Yeah, it certainly leaves it open-ended. It certainly raises more questions than it answers. Yeah.
And I know there's like there are like those rumors, you know, those bits of speculation where people try to make this make sense in their heads. So they're like, oh, so maybe all of these movies are just in the Matrix or whatever. But I think that would be an oversimplification of what these movies are. Like, I think that would cheapen the trajectory of these movies in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I feel you. I think I get that. They definitely start more grounded, as we've been alluding to, or we've actually just been straight out saying. When you get into sort of John Wick 2, 3, the sort of sense of heightened reality is increased into 4, and then 5 just kind of goes off the deep end with it. Or that's kind of a negative phrase. 5 just really fully runs with it. Yeah, I can see why people would be displeased or would try to, like, I don't know, sort of twist this into something that necessarily makes sense, but I don't think it even does or has to.
Right.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm just rambling. I liked it. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I kind of like how the final shot that we get is just Lawrence Fishburne chilling in some restaurant, and it looks like he has a very thoughtful expression on his face. So I guess he's like thinking about all that has transpired during this film. So I don't know, maybe he's like supposed to be the audience surrogate in this moment, you know, looking back on the film or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't say his character represented an audience surrogate in the previous movies. Perhaps it does here. But yeah, that's a good question. Who in the John Wick series would be an audience surrogate, if there is anyone?
Yeah, it feels like they just assigned that to him for this movie because they weren't sure like what else to do with that whole idea. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they just wanted some good final shot with Lawrence Fishburne.
He is a bit of an outsider to the rest of the cast, even just the random like Wick fodder people who only show up to fight him for 2 seconds and get killed. Because everyone else uses guns and knives or some combination of the two, but Fishburne is out here with nunchucks. He was even eating with the nunchucks at the end, which I thought was a nice touch.
Yeah.
So he is a bit of an outsider from that point of view.
Right. And like right before it cuts to credits, he says like the final line, which is, "They'll always be fighting skeletons." And I guess that's supposed to make us think even more that this is something that lots of people do, you know, fighting off skeletons, whether that means their own past or death itself. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, fighting off demons, harking back to the sort of the big monologue in the middle of the movie.
Yeah. So, was there anything else you want to bring up, or do you want to just go into final thoughts and score out of 10?
Yeah, I don't think I necessarily have much more. It was a very confusing movie, a very interesting one, a very experimental one, and bold one, right? A bold decision to have the John Wick series go in this direction, when none of the previous movies indicated that it necessarily would.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I will say the music felt very trippy. Like the score, it got psychedelic and sometimes even got pretty haunting. Like it kind of felt like a horror movie at certain points, even during the fight sequences. So it was a bit of a juxtaposition, a contrast there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so what are your final thoughts, score out of 10, and unit of measurement for that score out of 10 for John Wick Chapter 4, Rest for the Wick?
5, you mean?
Oh yeah, Chapter 5. Yeah, what am I saying?
Yeah, so I think I've said most of what I have to say. Which is, I admit, not very much. It's very hard to collect my thoughts on this. It's honestly pretty difficult. If nothing else, I at least respect this movie for doing what it did. Even if there were parts that I didn't necessarily like, and I did like most of it. Having the guts to do something like this, to go the direction that the creators wanted, I respect. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 10 psychedelic, auroraed out, trippy sequences out of 10. It might seem a little high, but my respect runs deep for John Wick Chapter 5.
Yeah, it's a little high, but the injection in the movie, that maybe could get people high. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a certain respect for this movie as well. I still have questions, even though they maybe don't need to be answered. But I think I enjoyed the ride well enough. It wasn't just the same thing as the previous movies. It tried to go outside the box, and I do appreciate how bold it was for doing that. I don't think I would go as high as you, but I think I'd give this an 8.5 out of 10 grains of wheat.
Yeah, that's sitting somewhere pretty high, pretty accurate, I would say.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for joining me once again, Kiyan.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. And for the continuation of the John Wick series, no less.
Yeah, and I know there's that spin-off movie Ballerina. This podcast will cover that at some point. It's on the list. I don't know which date exactly. I'll try that, but yeah, thanks for talking about John Wick 5 with me here. And do you have anything to plug currently, or just like a recommendation of a show or movie you want people to watch or something?
Yeah, no, I don't really have anything to plug at the moment. Obviously, another friend of the podcast, Dylan, and I did our own podcasts for years. So go ahead, and they're defunct now. But if you want to check out some completely finished podcasts, check out Trust Your Doctor, Doctor Who podcast. We also did one on the old British sci-fi series Blake 7. And that one's called Zenith, a Blake 7 podcast. We also had a general sci-fi podcast focusing mostly on British stuff, and that was called Inevitable. And you can find these on just any major podcast platform. And then we also had, of course, Triple Play, which maybe was our sort of not the best of our podcasts. No. Steven still contends that Triple Play was our best output, but I disagree. But feel free to also check that one out, of course.
Yeah, check them out and tell us whether you agree or disagree.
I think my perspective on Triple Play might be a little bit skewed because
right, because you're actually there and part of it. Yeah,
exactly. Part of the production woes we sometimes face on that one. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really have anything going on at the moment. I recommend, as for recommendations for stuff to check out, Delayed Replay. If this is your first, if this is the first, if this is the first episode you're listening to, go ahead and listen to the other ones, especially the ones that don't have me on them. Those are probably pretty entertaining. You can also listen to the ones that I am unfortunately on. No, I'm just kidding. Stop denigrating myself. And that's pretty much it. I'll stop rambling. Thanks again for having me on, Steven. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I also want to ask you, so since it's basically like Halloween season ish, like are there any things that you like to do around this time of year? Or like, I know like various people have their like traditions, but like, do you have anything like that, or anything you watch around this time of year, or is it just kind of whatever?
Yeah, so actually I've been dressing up on Halloween for the past couple of years, coincidentally enough, as John Wick. And so I really go hard with the costume. I know his costume is pretty simple, but I like to take it to the next level by shooting myself. Obviously in a non-vital area. I've been doing that for a couple years now. Obviously, I'm just kidding. No, there's really nothing that I do for Halloween.
Okay. Nice.
And I assume you have a Halloween tradition since you brought it up.
Yeah, like I think one of them that I like watching each year is Monster House. It's a 3D animated film.
I think I've watched that. I think I watched it as a kid.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Like watching that one as a kid in the theater, I was like, wait, if this is a kid's movie, they're making like these adult jokes and mentioning puberty, like what? But as you get older, it's like, oh man, this movie rocks type thing.
Yeah, maybe I should check it out. Sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, you could.
I like vaguely remember it. If I'm remembering the right thing, I like vaguely remember it from when I was a kid.
Yeah, you could check it out and write a Letterboxd XD review.
God dang it.
But yeah, I guess that'll do it. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. And without further delay, have a good day. All right, now for the plugs. Before my other self comes on to review some other things, you can follow me at Steven Shinder on Instagram, Twitter /X, Threads, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook, StevenShinder.com for info on my standalones and Stepping Stones novels, which are available on Amazon. You can keep an eye out for Cinemabies, my friend Jesse's podcast. He said he's going to put the Question Possible Answer Saw episode that I was on, going to put it out, I think, toward the end of the month, so like around the 20th anniversary or around Halloween, something like that. So yeah, subscribe to Cinemabies. And you can also email Delayed Replay via delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on wheat. I don't know, what's your favorite type of bread? You can also find me on Yesshift, a podcast /vlog that I do with my dad, or sometimes it's just me hosting if our schedules don't align. Interviewed drummer Joe Cass of Yes tribute band Total Mass Retain recently, and also reviewed a Rick Wakeman release titled Yes Sonata. And there's other stuff coming up, like a look back at some of the prog stock stuff and the maybe like other interviews. So if music's your thing, check that out. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. So without further delay, here's my other self. Hey everyone, Steven Shinder from that other universe, gonna be sharing my thoughts on stuff I've been watching recently. So I don't think I talked about this when I was previously on here, but I did finish The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, and I do think Season 2 was an improvement over Season 1. I think if I were ranking these on-screen Tolkien adaptations, I would put it above
the Hobbit trilogy, but below the Lord of the Rings trilogy, as well as the 1978 film and the 77 Hobbit movie. You know, I enjoyed it, but it doesn't stick with me quite as much. I do really like how they concluded the season. You know, it was pretty epic. And yeah, very curious to see what they do with the series next. Jurassic World Chaos Theory just started a new second season. I've seen the first 3 episodes so far, and they're really good. The way that they're continuing from something that was kind of dangling at the end of season 1. So I'm not going to be talking about that much here at the moment, but keep an eye out for an upcoming episode of Intergalactic Peace Coalition, where there will be a chaos theory discussion. And I've also been discussing stuff over on my YouTube channel, Steven Shinder Reviews in video form. My review of Joker Folie à Deux is up, sort of talking about why I don't think it's quite as bad as people say, but I can kind of see why people might rate it low somewhat. But yeah, for the most part, though, daily on the channel I've been putting up a review of a different piece of Chucky media. So I did the first 7 films, and after that's the 24 episodes of the TV series, so that all adds up to 31, and October has 31 days. And yeah, the one that's out the latest is season 2 episode 4, which might possibly be my favorite episode of season 2. So yeah, it's been a really fun exercise going through the franchise like that one day at a time. As far as what else I've been watching, I've finally gotten back into Fear the Walking Dead. I'm halfway through the final season, the 8th season, and there are some interesting developments, but I'm not quite sure yet on my verdict. In terms of movies, I watched Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2, which I didn't think was as funny as the first movie, although people seem to be saying it was an improvement. But yeah, I don't know, I guess we perceive things differently. It did feel it was trying to get more into the lore, and it's kind of a separate universe from the first film. It's one where the first film is a movie within this second one's universe. Like, the first movie was based on true events and they changed things type of thing. I also watched Mousetrap, which is one of those things that was made with Steamboat Willie, Mickey Mouse short, having gone in public domain. And it started off seeming like it could be funny, but ultimately it was too stupid for me to find much hilarity in it. I did really enjoy the Netflix movie It's What's Inside. I feel like it really reinvented the body swap premise in a refreshing way. I think that's really worth checking out. And I also just watched another Netflix movie called Woman of the Hour. That one is based on true events and directed by Anna Kendrick. Did a really great job. She also plays someone in it, and it's pretty unsettling. It might be one of those movies where it's good, it's well done, but I'm not sure that I'd watch it again, at least not anytime soon, because of how unsettling it is. Like, the realities of stalkers in real life and what they can do to women. It's pretty unsettling. I also watched Girl Haunts Boy. That was also Netflix one. I thought it was charming. It's about a girl who dies in the 1920s, and then 100 years later, this boy who I think is in high school. I think it was high school. He's a teenager, and he puts on this ring and is able to see her, and so he catches her up, and they're trying to figure out where she go from here. So I thought it was a fun ride and had some emotional moments. Yeah. And you can see anything else that I've been watching if you go to my Letterboxd account, and anything I've been reading if you go to my Goodreads account for that matter. I actually discussed a book called Open a Channel, A Woman's Trek with a few friends in an online Star Trek book club I'm in, and that was a read that really grabbed my attention. It was insightful and sheds light on some of the progress in Star Trek, but also moments where there could have been more progress. And yeah, it was kind of an eye-opening read. There's also some Star Trek news coming out of New York Comic Con, apparently. So there's finally a January release date for the Section 31 movie. That's going to be pretty exciting. And I think they said that the upcoming Starfleet Academy show will have 2 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. Or they've greenlit a second season, I should say. Not that it'll be 2 seasons total and then that's it. Like, they probably want to do more, but yeah, they've greenlit a second season ahead of time, which is cool. Strange New Worlds season 3 is also happening. Next week, the 5th and final season of Lower Decks begins, so that's gonna be kind of an emotional season, I think. In terms of Star Wars, Skeleton Crew comes out in December. I'm hoping that it's great. I don't have a problem with the suburbs being shot in Star Wars. Like, yeah, there are some stupid opinions about that, but yeah, I just hope it's entertaining enough. The Dragon Prince, the final season of that, is also coming out in December. I feel like I might be forgetting something that I also saw. I'm just scrolling real quick. Oh, Daredevil Born Again has a March 4th release date. So yeah, that's a show that's felt so far away for so long, but now it feels really close. So that'll be cool. And Karate Kid Legends, that's gonna be the full title of the upcoming movie with Ralph Macchio and Jackie Chan, and the new Karate Kid of that movie. I'm glad they didn't just call it Karate Kid. Karate Kid Legends feels like an actual title, and yeah, and I'm sure it'll be in the same, like, I don't know why it wouldn't be, but I'm sure it's the same universe as Cobra Kai. It'll probably take place after, and I'm looking forward to the remaining episodes of that show. It's been great. Agatha All Along has been really good, especially with this week's episode. It mainly focused on Joe Locke's character, and it was a great flashback episode. Weirdly, Penguin also had a flashback episode. Well, 2 flashback episodes, but the more recent one focusing on Kristen Miliotti's character. Is that how her name is pronounced? I think so. But yeah, the most recent episode focusing on her, on Sophia Falcone, it's my favorite episode of the show so far, and is being hailed as one of the best episodes on television lately. Just how it shows her journey and her time in Arkham. So really cool flashback episodes recently. Even in Chaos Theory, the 3rd episode of the new season was a flashback episode that I thought was really cool. So yeah, overall I've been really satisfied with some of the newer stuff I've been watching on TV, and that's always good. Sometimes things can be kind of hit and miss. Invincible season 3 has a February 6th release date. That's a quicker turnaround than I expected, so pleasant surprise. I'm looking forward to seeing Crypto in the upcoming Superman movie, Crypto the Super Dog. I just think that'll be a nice change of pace. I think that's pretty much everything. So Yeah, this show will be back in 2 weeks and covering something else. Um, yeah, I don't remember if there's like something else I was gonna say, but haven't been watching as much horror related stuff, but been like reading and listening to some stuff. So yeah, still in the spirit of that, and looking forward to a couple parties coming up. I don't know that there's something I'm gonna see in the theater for this Halloween time, but yeah, like I still feel the spooky season and all that. And yeah, so happy upcoming Halloween, upcoming 10th anniversary of Saw. Yeah, check out that episode when it drops over on Cinemabies. And happy 10th anniversary of John Wick, and when that comes up. I guess this month on Delayed Replay has been kind of a Lionsgate month, but yeah, that'll do it for now, and without further delay, have a good day.